Coming up, proceedings to begin in connection with alleged abuse by Defense Force officers against Cuban detainees at the detention center.
Also tonight, Stephen Jai Stubbs has another day in court.
And blind faith, how fire officials helped to build it this Fire Safety Week. The National Report starts now.
Now in HD. ZNS Network presents The Bahamas Tonight. This segment of the news is brought to you by BTC, powered by Line.
After weeks of protests by Cuban exile groups in Miami, the report on alleged abuse of Cuban detainees at the detention center has finally been completed. Good evening, everyone. I'm Keishla Adderley.
And I'm Candino Knowles. Well, the Ministry of National Security announced today that the prosecution of those Defense Force officers implicated in all of this is imminent. And while the matter is not being treated as a criminal one, National Security Minister Dr. Bernard Nottage explains that the proceedings will be conducted in accordance with the rules prescribed under the Defense Act and regulations, which basically amounts to a trial before the magistrate's court.
The persons who have been implicated in any way will have the opportunity to have their case heard by the Defense Force process.
And despite questions about the integrity of this entire process, the National Security Minister promised full transparency. And to ensure this, Dr. Nottage says 3 independent observers, who he did not name today, will attend the hearings once they begin.
We will refrain from making any comments concerning the proceedings while they are under consideration. The hearings will be held in camera, but a full report of the proceedings will be issued at their conclusion. This is to avoid publication of matters which may compromise national security.
Since the Cuban story broke, officials report that there has been an increase in the number of Cuban migrants illegally entering the Bahamas. It's something Dr. Nottage believes is a part of a bigger strategy for Cubans seeking to get out of that country.
When it was reported that Panama had agreed to take some of the asylum seekers and we did not respond, it was because while this was in the newspapers, there had been no approach by the government of Panama to the Bahamas. And one of the reasons why we were careful about that was that we didn't want it to appear to persons who are seeking refugee status that the Bahamas would be open country now, they could come and if they wait long enough, we'll get them to a third country.
And while he thanked Bahamians traveling to Miami for exercising restraint during this time, Dr. Nottage sent this message to the Cuban community in Florida, particularly Cuban merchants.
It would behoove them to be more considerate, to be more understanding of the plight with which we are confronted on a regular basis, having to expend funds either housing them or feeding them, etc. That doesn't give us any excuse to do anything that is illegal or harmful to the detainees, because we understand their issues too. But it's time to be fair.
No word on exactly when the hearings will begin, but in the meantime, an inquiry is being launched into the administration and management of the country's military arm, which is set to begin within the next 10 days.
Foreign Affairs and Immigration Minister the Honorable Fred Mitchell confirmed to our news team via telephone today from New York that Royal Bahamas Defense Force officers apprehended 13 Cuban migrants in Bahamian waters yesterday. He confirmed that the illegal migrants were transported to Nassau for processing today before their return to Cuba.
I was just quite surprised last evening to find that I was informed by the officials that some 13 or so Cuban migrants were interdicted again in the seas in Bahamian waters. And I'm just trying to determine what is driving this, because the numbers seem a bit unusual to me. And so it seems to me that it's only prudent for our country to have some kind of formal review or investigation of this to find out whether there's any criminal element involved in driving people to leave their country and come through here, particularly given what's happening with these protests in Florida, whether that in fact is driving this. But I just want to say on behalf of to the Bahamian people that I take this job of immigration minister very seriously, and I don't mean for this to get on top of us, and so we're going to be resolute in trying to bring a stop to it.
The Bahamas became the 157th country to sign on to the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities today, setting the framework for the introduction of national disability legislation. Social Services and Community Development Minister Honorable Melanie Griffin signed on behalf of the Bahamas at 9:30 this morning at the United Nations headquarters in New York. Minister Griffin, who described the moment as historic, indicated that the convention, along with the proposed national disability legislation, is expected to give Bahamians with disabilities true independence, as it will protect and enhance the rights of disabled persons nationwide. Minister Griffin said becoming a signatory to the convention and the enactment of legislation were two of the government's commitments made by the Christie administration upon assuming office in May 2012. The convention has been ready for signature for 7 years.
An armed robbery suspect who tried to use the hospital as an escape route this morning was stopped in his tracks. According to the Public Hospitals Authority, the suspect, who had just led police on a car chase from Bay Street to Elizabeth Avenue, crashed into a parked car at the PMH before approaching the entrance to the maternity ward. That's when hospital security jumped into action, denying him access before helping police take him down. No staff or patients were injured during the episode.
37-year-old convicted murderer Stephen Dye Stubbs was back in court today, but this time for his attorney, that is, to settle some issues relating to his abetment to commit murder case. Stubbs, along with 30-year-old Giovanni Roberts, are facing abetment to murder charges in relation to Clayton Daniel Smith and Kamiko Jones. The two men were gunned down in Ridgeland Park back in 2011. Meantime, Stubbs, Andrew Davis, and Clinton Evans are facing the death penalty for killing police constable Jimmy Ambrose 13 years ago. They'll be sentenced for that crime on October 16th.
The Ministry of National Security today launched a pilot program aimed at exposing at-risk young men to the realities of a life of crime. The program, called Shock Treatment, is organized with the assistance of a number of local pastors. Young men ranging in ages between 12 and 18 years old were taken to the Central Detective Unit's headquarters, where senior police officers briefed them on the dangers of criminality.
Now, the no-holds-barred discussion also exposed the troubled boys to what really happens when they get on the wrong side of the law. From CDU on JFK, the young men were driven via police escorts to Her Majesty's Prison, where the shock treatment continued. They were given some stern advice from a number of convicted murderers. Brothers Prince and Brendan Roll talked about what the experience of prison was like and how they got in the program.
It's rough. I don't be like that. Look at that. I don't come here.
What's the worst part about you?
The cell too small. I'm treating this guy, stay in one cell. I ain't lying. I know how to do that. Prison is a hard thing to go through. It's really hard to go through. Because if you stay here, it's like hell. It's like you in hell house. It smells very bad. It smells like vomit and call it nanny. It smells like all that. It smells like garbage. Like, you know, someone just chewed doodle on you. It smells like that.
While the program's effect on the participants was unmistakable, some of the facilitators were also moved by the sight of prison life.
Going in there, seeing all those young men between the age of 15 and 17, and they really break my heart, you know. I mean, just to see these young men incarcerated, locked down like animals, that ain't God's plan, man. You know, I have 3 boys myself, and I don't know if I could take me looking at one of them behind that bars, just to see these young men. I mean, literally hundreds of them behind bars, hopeless. You know, for things they've done, man. I mean, there got to be some way that we could change the system, man. It just breaks my heart to see all these young men just locked down like animals, man.
Now, the program is a part of the government's Project Safe Bahamas program, and according to organizers, it will be rolled out completely very soon.
In our first look at weather, the tropics remain quiet tonight, but we do have a front boundary over northern Florida. That, coupled with a mid-level trough over the extreme northern Bahamas, both systems are creating unstable conditions over the Northern Islands. But outside of our studios just now, we have cloudy skies, your temperature at 85 degrees, relative humidity 75%. Winds out of the southeast at 7 knots, your barometric pressure 1,014.0 millibars, that's 29.92 inches, and it is steady. But stay tuned. Temperatures around the Family of Islands, travel and boating forecast is still to come.
Well, still to come, reading is for rock stars. Find out who has coined the theme.
This portion of the news is brought to you by Shell HELIX Ultra. Performance you can see.